Absolutely, and we try to keep these more informal and more fun. So we really do encourage everybody to participate. And thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, so I was thinking that maybe I'd first go over, what we're gonna talk about today. So, right, in FAWIF 1603, there were some specific changes about OS patching, and I believe that it shows up here. So the things about software update that changed, and things changed specifically for Apple stuff and Windows stuff, and probably more significantly for Windows than Apple. Um, and we have this best practice guide that I'll paste the link into the chat for, that kind of walks you through the things that we're going to go through. And then there was somebody that asked, Kofi, you asked to speak. You should be able to speak now if you unmute yourself.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I was just trying to
Oh, okay.
just note that I
Well,
upgraded.
it's too late now, buddy. You're on stage. You got to talk.
No, nothing. I'm just excited to see what these software updates can offer me going in 16 going forward.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want, you can stay on stage. If you have a question, you can unmute. And in fact, anybody could raise their hand if they want to be able to ask something, because it'd be more interesting if the case. But everybody can I believe see my screen. If you can't, drop out of Discord and come back in. If you're using the browser, it usually has a worse experience than the application. So try using the application for this or for future ones. It really does work better. Okay, so this guide, we're going to kind of walk through the things in this guide, but if you were after this I put the link in the chat, if you were to walk through this guide, it'll basically get you to the same place. It's just more convenient if we do this all together. Okay, so I'll bring up my admin, which you should be able to see now. And so I have it set up like I've just gotten to 1603, and oh, and Marcus can't hear. So this is unfortunate. Um, so Discord definitely has an issue today, which is unfortunate. But if folks quit and come back in, unless, did my audio drop? This is gonna be terrible.
Oh, now
No,
it's
no.
working. Do you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes.
So I was going.
Okay.
So the recording.
Yeah, everything was gone. Everything was gone for a bit, I think.
Okay.
All
Well
right. So anyway,
then.
let's jump in before it quits again.
Yeah, it really does not ever happen. This is an unfortunate thing with a bunch of people, but yeah. So we're gonna walk through um, how you get through this KB article that I pasted in the chat, and all the audio will be in the recording, so that part can be good. So mine is set up like I'm in 1603. I was previously doing patching, the old way, and now I've come in and I want to get to the new way that we're patching. And so, like, the first thing is I may have some file sets from doing OS patching from the past. And the ones that are from before FileWave 16, you probably, definitely want to just delete them. You can flush them out. The old ones, they work with the so the old ones for Windows specifically, because they use the offline cab file, which is not used anymore in 16. And so your best bet is for the old Windows OS patches, just flush them out of the system as like a step one. And then you could get started with the new.
Why are they not used anymore, Josh?
Because the offline cab file that Microsoft would provide would always come late. So Patch Tuesday would come and it would take a couple of days for them to publish it. Sometimes they would put breaking changes into it that would then interfere with being able to use it for patching. And it was a big file that clients would have to download every time it changed. And so that was like this big bit of data that, was, those are the negatives I know of, that the repeated
Yeah, well, and it was also limited. That way of doing patching only includes
I think I lost Tony.
almost a gig going to every client. No longer has to be done, and so it's kind of reinvigorated for all the Windows devices. But that means that all those old file sets are no longer used. So if your clients are up to version 16, your servers at 16, you'll want to clear out those. So thanks, Josh, for covering that.
Yeah. And so then the new thing is, how do I get to the updates? Because they're not in the wizard up here, right? You're used to going there and creating the updates one by one, and then perhaps picking to enable them automatically for all. And we'll talk about kind of the new way that you'd create them. So it's right here on the left, and you'll be able to see Windows versus Apple. And when you come here, this is, a pretty big list, right? But if I limit it to requested only, this is a list of the things in my environment that have actually asked for updates. So it's much, oh, it's still no video. Tony, you can see my video, right?
Yep, sure can.
Okay, so it'll be in the recording. Kev, if you're using the Discord app, I'm not sure. You could listen and then catch the recording. If you're using the browser, try and switch to the app. I wish I had a better answer, but we'll get better with these, and I'll check into Discord, see if they have open issues right now, and we'll try and obviously avoid Discord issues when we're using it. So, okay, so this is a shorter list because I've requested only, and in fact, the same thing is true for Apple. If I do requested only, it's a shorter list. You probably want to deal with requested only because those are the things that your machines are asking for, so it's easier than creating everything, but you can. So in the old way, I would have to pick an update, pick to create it. It was kind of a one by one. But with this, I could actually select all. So now I've got my requested only. I could select all and I can create file sets. Now, these all are requested only, so it's a shorter list, but I also might have created some of these before. So in fact, I'll create just one and show you what I mean. So let's say I created this one. And when I go to create it, I'm going to throw it into OS patching. We're going to talk about this, but I'm going to throw it into OS patching for Windows Alpha. So that's like my first round of stuff. So it made a file set, and you may have seen it kind of disappeared there. And why did it do that? Because there are filters, and by default, when you come in here, you may see that it's on all file set statuses. So they're all showing here. But when you're working on an ongoing basis, you probably want to find the ones that have no file set that exists, because that means you haven't really created it yet. And these filters are pretty good about being able to filter on different things. You can also look for different categories of updates. And the association filter can be good for looking at particular group or smart group, because I guess, thinking about this, I always have a hard time explaining this, but if you had a group of devices that you wanted to see if they needed it, then you could use it for that. Am I saying that right? I don't know, Tony or PN. I want to say I struggle with this. I know it's helpful. It's just I struggle with the filter, because I know that when I have this created and it's active on that,
It allows you to filter by what you like. You could pick your alpha for Windows, and it would show you what patches you've got assigned to that group.
oh yeah, let's do that because I created one there.
Yeah. So it's
And
quite similar if you remember the way that the old, wizard worked on the top right, where you could click on a group and then the bottom, it would show you devices. It's a very similar filter to that. So if you wanted to see, like in this case, Josh is deploying to alpha, and then he's going to talk to us about beta and then production later. But if you wanted to see what things do I currently have assigned to my alpha devices, you can then filter in here based on the group, and then see exactly which patches are assigned. And then, of course, all of these different filters work together, so you can turn on all different flavors of this.
Yeah,
And you also see the reverse filtering option there.
yeah. And so I could say I want these three, so you can multi-select here, or I can reverse the filtering, to get the opposite of what's selected. So I think that could be helpful. And then if you want to clear it, so you'll see active if there's a filter, and you can clear it if you want to go back to just normal, requested only. So for me, at least in my brain, requested only is great, and no file set is great, because then you don't, because you can technically create a patch more than once, and you'll see what happens. I'll do, well, why don't I just do this? Boom. Okay, so I created that a couple of times, right? Just to kind of show like what could occur. And I want to be in file sets, and I want to be in alpha. You see how there's like the 1 and the 2? So you can technically create it more than once. So that's why I like that no file set thing, to be able to know like what I've made, because it could start to get confusing for you.
Yeah, so effectively, that filter of requested only, Windows, no file set, this is the equivalent of new.
Yes.
Right. So these are new patches I have not deployed anywhere in my environment, or at least in this case, not created, because there's a difference between having a file set and having it actually assigned to devices. Those are two different things.
Yes. And so you already kind of saw that I associated it with an alpha group, and so maybe I'll just show you that on the Apple side first. I'll show you that the same thing is true, that I have this no file set. The method that we patch Apple stuff, I don't think that changed in 16. It's just that where we
It did not.
store the updates changed, like the workflow changed.
And there's a question in the chat about nudge and changing the patching methodology there.
Yeah, and the default 1 hour that you prompted, I think PN, I don't think we can change that right now, right? That, that notification.
For now we don't, and the 1 hour is Apple default. I know that it was possible before with DM way to install apps. I'm looking at the DDM way is able to give us more flexibility there, or if this is something FileWave has to do. So installing the app and then, or notifying the end user and then using the DDM command later. So that's part of the things we will have to improve at some point. Maybe just a general remark there. We've made a lot of work in 16.0 for improving updates, as Josh will show today. But that's not our final work on software updates. So we still have a few items, or more than a few items on our list to improve software update management in FileWave. So take the opportunity during this call to raise your questions, your wishes, and then we'll see how we can add them in FileWave.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, that very comment was why I didn't answer your question earlier, Josh, about that association filter, because I was busy messaging PN telling him stuff we should add as you were doing this.
Well, on the Apple side too, I can multi-select, and I could, again, I'll go to my alpha, and we're going to talk about this, but I can create them, and they'll disappear because I had picked that this is no file set, so they disappear from the list. So my workflow can be, come in here, requested only, the platform, and no file set, and maybe I even pick all the patches, and then I assign it to my alpha. And so let's look at how I'm actually associating it with things. So here in clients, and that KB article talks about this exact process. So when Tony and I used to actively, like, we worked somewhere where we managed machines, we followed this methodology that there's an alpha and then a beta and then production. An alpha could be like your machine. You probably have a couple of machines. You may have a coworker, who has a couple of machines. An alpha could be as simple as it's just a group that you put a couple of machines in, and they're always the first ones to get everything. And that's good to do, and it's good to break this up right now for performance reasons. It's good to break it up by platform. So Apple versus Windows, it will be better for performance the way things are today. And it can be cleaner to look at because this list can grow and grow and grow. So you'll go into alpha first, spend a couple of days with a patch in alpha or whatever you feel comfortable with, and then you would ultimately move it over to beta, and beta would be like a department. So if you think about it, and again, it can be just a static group. It doesn't have to be a smart group. You could use a custom field to have people marked as alpha or beta and have the smart group populated, but you'd put more devices in beta so that maybe some assistants get it. Maybe if you have a machine that shows the lunch menu in the cafeteria, where it's not awful if it was to blow up because it's not really a user machine and you could get it back in business pretty easily. So have some ones that get it for beta and have them use it for a couple of days at least. And then production is just, everybody gets it. So by the time you've hit production, you've done it to a few machines and then a group of machines and then every machine, and this is not really like a FileWave thing. This is just Apple or Microsoft can have an issue with their patches, or you might find a patch that interferes with an application that you have. And so it's really good to have that delay of testing it. Even with the most urgent of patches, you want to test for a couple of days to be able to see that it's safe. I saw there was a question about what happens if a client asks for 15.4.0 macOS or Windows Cumulative Update 3.25, but there are already clients asking for newer ones, and I only make a file set for 15.4.1 Windows. Will the clients only ask for... So we're talking about Windows cumulative patches. So the thing we switched to, so we talked about we got rid of the offline cab file. Now it's an online check. So if you would go into settings on your Windows machine and see both patches offered, and that both could apply in the same round, then the same thing I think would play out in FileWave, that it would potentially apply both. But what you usually see in Windows Update is that with cumulative, one will replace the other. So it'll know from the online catalog that it doesn't need the prior one. It won't apply.
That's a really important distinction, because with this change, it's no longer anything about the server dictating anything.
Yeah.
The client is the thing that's actually doing the choosing. And Josh didn't cover it yet, but he will on this the production group that he's got here, where he's got devices in production, and that's a smart group looking at Windows devices, and I can only presume that he set that to include all Windows devices. So when he's got a smart group that's assigning that, it's Windows, and he's got that it's included in OS patching. So he's got this smart group. This smart group is a replacement for that checkbox before, the checkbox that said apply to all devices. This is the equivalent of apply to all devices. So if we're talking about a cumulative update and you don't want to do the 325 one, but you want to do the 425 one, you can control that from the file set level by simply removing the file set that you had, if you wanted to control it granularly like that. And that goes for all the platforms, right? But as to what will actually be installed on the device, let's assume that I I didn't want to deploy the 325 one anymore, so I set up the 425 one. I've assigned it to all devices. The only devices that will install that 425 cumulative update are the devices that need the 425 cumulative update, and they decide that. The devices themselves are the ones that do that on both platforms, for Apple and for Microsoft. The device itself is the thing that's determining what it needs.
Yeah. And so it won't install both if both are applied unless Windows would want to normally apply both. So yeah, and I used a custom field. In my case, this deviates actually from the KB article because this is a shared lab, and I don't want to patch like Zach in support's machine unless he wanted to actually see it get patched. So I use a custom field. You know, and in fact, you might use a custom field to mark that something's included in patching if you had a situation where you had devices that you wanted to exclude from being in production patching. So custom fields are a great way to kind of remove somebody. But there is another way. So I'm going to show you how we get from these client groups to the patch actually getting deployed, because I use deployments for this instead of associations. So I have my structure, right? Alpha, I set a couple of machines. Beta has maybe a department, and it could just be a manual group added. And then production is supposedly every machine, unless you do something to exclude. And I excluded with a custom field in here, but I could have also done it when I made my deployments. So these are my deployments for patching. And in the article, again, I'll walk through this, but so the alpha one for Apple, and maybe I'll open this one to show the tabs. So for the alpha patching deployment, it includes clients that are in the alpha patching group. That makes sense. The file sets included are the alpha patching group of patches. So when I created those patches and put them in the alpha, they're automatically in this deployment, so that I don't really have to edit this, hopefully, ever, is my hope. And they would end up just in here by getting created in the right place. And then for this deployment, I just have it as a direct association. I didn't really mess with this. So one thing about this way of doing it is if you wanted to do things with leveraging any deadlines in file sets or with file sets, you'd have to think about if you keep reusing the same groups for things, well, then you'd keep pushing the deadline back. So I don't know that that really conceptually works out very well. But otherwise, everything except for maybe a deadline concept works pretty good for this to be almost no effort. So I made this alpha one. It has the alpha machines and the alpha patches. When you get to beta,
Josh, can I ask you a question? If you go back into that, or in this one for a
Okay.
second, if you go back to the file set or to the options tab again for a second, the start downloading at the inactive, the delete, the activate files really is not pertinent for any of this.
oh, because the
Why?
client drives it.
Yeah. You want to explain maybe why none of those things are pertinent for these software updates? And it does matter for the Windows patches in particular with boosters.
Yeah, because so the file set in the server is not really the content. It's just like a description of it. It tells it like, here's what you need. But there's not really like a thing to grab from the FileWave server in that file set, as I understand it. So now for Apple devices, it's pretty simple and just like it's always been. You should have an Apple caching server. If you have Apple stuff, you probably want to set up Apple caching server. It's really easy to do. And if you do Windows patching, we've thought of you too. So your Windows clients on their own will try and go to Microsoft for the updates, like by default, if you did nothing. But if you have a FileWave booster in place, then the client will ask the booster, and the booster will go to Microsoft and get the content, and the booster will cache the content for 7 days. So boosters become more important to your internet bandwidth with version 16 if you have Windows. So,
Thank you, sir.
yeah. So, oh yeah, so then I was going to show when we get to beta, it's a little different. So in beta, the targets are both alpha and beta, and the file sets are the beta ones. So why
do you target? Yeah, why do you target both of those?
why is that? Yeah, so let's imagine that machine A is in alpha, and I've tested a patch for 3 days, and now I've moved the patch to beta. Well, the machine A was actually off. It didn't get it when it was in alpha, but it's in my alpha group, and now the patch is in the beta group. So if I didn't do this, then the machine that was alpha that was asleep for 3 days wouldn't get it even when it was in beta. So in this way, when you get to the point of beta, you really want to include any alpha or beta target machines. And the file sets for the beta group would just be the beta file sets because you don't really want to send the alpha file sets to beta machines. So hopefully that makes sense. But otherwise, these are the same. And when you get to production, well, the targets are production and the file sets are only production because I don't want to set things that are in alpha or beta to production. So if you do it in this way, and the article spells this out too, then you can kind of walk through this workflow. And so I'll actually go through this. We'll have like sort of a pretend, I came in, on Monday and checked out what I have. So I have my requested only Apple, no file set. I'm maybe if I do not go into patching like in super detail, like if I'm just trying to make sure my machines are patched, and I might look for everything requested. I might create file set, and then I could, because a real environment would have a lot of stuff, I could look for alpha, and I could go to the Apple alpha one. I hit OK. It's going to create them. And by the way, there's no real limit on what you can create. I accidentally created 300 file sets at one time, and it worked just fine. Took a minute, but worked just
That was one of the major things that we wanted to do here, was make creating the patches a lot easier than it was before. And the way you had to do it before, not only did you have to do it one by one, but it also downloaded them at the time that you created them. So you had to then wait for that as well. But now that they're just metadata, you can easily create them all and create them in one place. And in this case, Josh is creating them all, but you don't necessarily have to the question that was asked before about how, you don't have to even create the file set, right? So we've got the cumulative update there for Windows 11 24H2. I don't know which, that's a 2025-04. Like maybe I also have one for 2503. In this case, I don't have to create both. I could just create the 2025-04 if I wanted to. But that makes me want to say to PN, we really ought to have a way of saying that we'd like to ignore a patch. Right, so we don't have to look at it.
Although I would guess that this was probably because a machine said, hey, I needed this, and then this became available. But then would this drop off when when every machine that said it needed it checks in and gets off this list? So Zacharelius and Waffle Toast here, they haven't been online, I don't think. So they haven't said oh, I don't need it anymore. So that's why.
Correct. If devices would have reported that the install is not requested anymore because you upgraded the device manually, or if another update would make this update obsolete, then the update will be marked as not requested anymore and will get away from there.
Well, and that's a super important point, PN, because the definition in here, the source of truth, as you were for all devices, is the device itself. It's no longer anything about the server. So what a device says it's missing is what's missing. What it says is installed. And what that means is no matter what method a device got patched by, it will show correctly in FileWave one way or the other that it's missing or installed. But if it's missing and just offline, of course, it hasn't reported in for a month, like this device that Josh is looking at. Well, then of course the data is going to stay there.
Yeah, yeah. And when it checks in, then it would reflect the current real state, which actually I showed something that I didn't explain I was going to show. So this list, if you double click, you can see a particular patch and see who's missing it or needs it, and whether there's a file set already created or not for it. And so it's a really good way to check status on things when somebody asks you, are all the machines patched? And you can figure out pretty easily if they are or not.
And this is basically a brand new view. That view at an individual patch level, showing all devices that are missing that patch, is a view that we really didn't have before in that software update system.
Yeah, and so
So
here,
it really does allow you to look in detail at any particular patch. And in the reverse, you can look at any individual device and see the list as well.
oh, that's true. Yep. And so maybe I'll go to a machine in a little, but I'm going to create my alpha windows, right? Because we said it's Monday morning, and I was, going through and just checking on what's needed by machines. In my case, I created them all. Now I did create the cumulative update for March and for April. If those machines, like, there might not have been a point to making March, because when those machines come online and they check online with Microsoft, they're going to say, oh, April's available. I want to take April. And so I didn't really have to make it, but if I want to kind of do the easy route, then I would just do this. I'd just pick everything. Um, and then in my file sets here, I can see that my alpha has this stuff. And so it would be in place when I do a model update. Devices would perhaps get it, and everything would kind of flow. And if you had a booster for your Windows machines, you'd be very happy because it would cache that instead of them all going to Microsoft. Also, a lot of you might have proxies in place. And so as far as traffic goes, if you don't allow traffic normally from clients to get to Microsoft's infrastructure, then you probably do need them to talk to Microsoft. But for grabbing the file set, it can frequently be easier if it goes through a proxy, because then the proxy can talk to anything and can fetch it. So now it's in alpha. I do my model update, right? And I wait a couple of days to see that machines get patched and that nobody complains. And usually what happens in alpha is somebody will see a problem, but they'll think it's just them and they won't report it. Try when you're doing your alpha and your beta to actively ask people about, was there anything that you at all think was weird or different? Because I've been guilty of this too, that you get through testing and you figure, oh, my machine was just an exception. And then you push the thing out and you find that it wasn't really an exception, and a thing breaks much more widely. So,
well, and to that point, Josh, it's really important. Like we're here talking about the FileWave implication for doing this, but there's outside of FileWave stuff too. It's really important, like with your alpha testing group, that you tell them ahead of time.
yes.
I'm getting ready to deploy patches. So they, first of all, they know that something new is coming, right? And so when Josh mentioned before, we used to do this in production, and so of course we would announce that there would be a separate email that's going to everybody, not just the assignment of the patch, but assignment of it and an email that says, hey, we've just assigned this thing. We'll be testing for the next 3 days. Please let us know if you've got any kind of issue. And that in both of the two rounds, we happen to be doing alpha and beta, but if you only do, like one level of testing before you deploy wider, it's still really important to request that feedback. Otherwise, you just won't know, and they won't know that anything happened. They'll just say, oh, I've got this problem, but I don't know what happened in the background.
Yep. So now when I want to go to beta, because I want to expand my test, the list of things that you'll have in alpha will probably be short, so it may be easy enough to just sort of drag it into beta if you like drag and drop. So in my case here, I'm going to drag it into beta alpha, or beta apple. So now they're over there, and I do a model update, and then in theory the ones that are in the beta are now going to get it maybe for a couple of days. You want to give it enough time to actually get feedback, and then
And highly recommend not doing the drag and drop if you've got a big long list of stuff, because that's where move to is
Yep,
way
that's
smarter, because it is so easy to miss with a drag and drop and accidentally. I accidentally put my alpha Apple patches in my beta Windows, file set group,
Yep.
and you wouldn't necessarily know it, right? Because it allowed you to do it, because that's what drag and drop's for.
Yeah, I mentioned
So
that
be careful.
because we were talking about drag and drop the other day about, do you guys use drag and drop a lot, or do you avoid it for the reason Tony said? Because you can also do move to and say beta, and then boom, and then I could move it to beta. So, and the right click, it is the much safer route. In my lab, it's a short list, so it's easy for a demo to move. But I would say move to is the much safer thing. We were just curious if people really, really like being able to drag and drop on things. So, okay, so I've got these. They're in beta. I'm going to move to, and I'm going to move it to production. And those are Apple patches. So I'm going to move it to the Apple production ones. All right. And then I have my beta stuff. I'm going to move to, even though it's a short list, and I'm going to do production Windows. And then they're over there, model update. And then it will, and then it'll be in effect. And I've walked through what could take place over the course of a week, but it's a couple of steps and it won't really take you much time to do. And then the only other piece is that your patching production will grow quite a bit. So you probably want to think about cleaning it up periodically. And that's something we've talked about internally, that it would be nice if there was sort of a wizard maybe to clean up old patches or something, or some kind of process to clean up things that haven't been asked for a while.
Josh, can I ask a question? Earlier, you showed the deployments you were using, and there's some real advantages to using deployments because you can do exceptions and stuff. But I noticed when you went to production with these, so you're creating them every time. You're creating them initially in alpha, and then you're moving them to your beta group, and then you're moving them to your production group. And so the alpha and beta client groups were regular, non-smart groups, and you just put particular devices in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the OS patching production is a smart group. But in the deployments, you explained why you had alpha and beta on the beta deployment. But why weren't alpha and beta in the production deployment?
Oh.
How does it still work?
Because, so when I get to production, those alpha and beta machines are part of production. Like they're just all the Windows machines obviously fall into so the production thing includes all the clients that are in alpha and beta. So by the time I get to production, the alpha and beta still qualify for the patch because the production group is where the patches are, and the alpha and beta machines are in the production smart group because it's all machines. So they would still qualify, like those patches flow through. The only thing I'm limiting is alpha patches will only go to alpha machines. Beta patches will go to alpha and beta machines. But when it gets to production, those are assigned to everybody, which includes the alpha and beta machines.
Well, and that's an important distinction because that's a smart group, right? And so what that also means, as you remember before, that checkbox that said automatically apply to any new device, this smart group is effectively doing that same thing. So if you, in this case, we're looking at the production Apple, right, group, and we didn't really talk about why we split the OSs apart here. So I'm sure Josh will cover that in a minute. But that means that any new Mac or new iPad that just comes into the environment, was never here before, will automatically get all patches that are necessary because it's in the smart group that puts it in this production patching.
And what did you say I would explain? Sorry, I missed that part.
Oh, just I notice here you split it out by Apple and Windows
Oh, yeah, that
for
was why I
your.
mentioned that it was for performance reasons in the current implementation. It makes the most sense to break it up by platform. It will make your server much happier for performance.
Yeah, and of course you could go as granular with that as you want. If you wanted to split Mac OS and iOS devices out from each other, you could do that as well.
And actually, so we've had customers where perhaps one person manages like all the iPads and one person is responsible for the Mac or Windows systems. And so having, Bill, who's in charge of iPads, manage the groups for the iPad patching, and then you just put iPad stuff through that workflow. And then having Jim or Jane, who's in charge of the Windows machines, handle the Windows groups. You can break it up that way for administrative reasons, and similarly like the iPads, the Macs, Apple TV. I guess you could break up all those patches into separate alpha beta production workflows depending on your setup. But at the very least, split up Apple from Windows.
So, Josh, let me ask a question. It's kind of a real world question. So, you're using a smart group that includes all, say, let's look at Windows for a second. You're including all the Windows devices and deploying all these patches to all those Windows devices.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the downside of patches is that a lot of them, the security ones in particular, require reboots.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're assigning all these things to production. That's going to, that impacts devices. So let's assume that I've got the CEO who, yeah, I want this patch to go to everybody, but I don't want it to go to the CEO today because he's going to be doing a presentation or she's going to be doing a presentation. What makes deployments a little bit better for this with your whole smart group assignment thing that allows you to basically accept or add exceptions for individual devices?
Yeah, so if I didn't want, for instance, the superintendent to have this happen, during a presentation maybe today, I want to, or I want to manually patch like the machine that shows the lunch menu in the cafeteria. Um, I could, with deployments, very easily say that, so production, I can add an exclusion. And then I could exclude Andrew's Windows 11 machine. And so now, even if he would fall into production patching, he'll still be excluded from it. So he won't get the patches. He won't think he needs the patch. Well, his machine will know that it needs the patches, but he won't get them from FileWave. Is that what you meant?
That was indeed what I meant. Thank you.
So I happen to do, in this lab, I happen to use a custom field to make them qualify for the smart group for production. But I think the deployment is much more transparent, and deployments is our future. So you really should take a look at deployments and see how you would be able to assign things and exclude things, because it is a more transparent way than making a custom field that causes them to either fall in or out of that smart group, and then somebody forgets about the logic. This is pretty obvious. If they're in exclusions, they're excluded.
And we're aware that it's a little bit easier to create an association than a deployment initially. So we're going to be working on that, making it faster to set up a deployment. But the one thing that's nice here is that once you've created these, you're actually never changing them.
Yeah.
They're all created, and then the only thing you're actually changing are file sets, right? If you get a new device that you want to include with the ability to duplicate deployments, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Which I noticed right away when I was building these out initially myself. So yeah, that's one of the things we need to put on the list. In fact, PN, please remind me to add that to George's list.
There's a ticket for that and for structure, because you'll notice that in associations that you have, you can have there's structure to everything else. structure here, but this is a flat
Yeah, I
list.
think reports is the best example of what we'll be doing with deployments. Is if you look at inventory queries, you can create groups and organize stuff and put things away. In inventory queries, the groups don't really mean anything. They're just a way to organize.
Yeah.
So we'll likely be doing that with deployments as well.
Yeah, so Larry, you're spot on with the
Yep.
group. As soon as you
100%.
go to use this, you'd figure that out.
Yes. But it is nice that once you have created these, you're never changing them again. You can name them so you can come find them later if you did, in fact, did need to make a change.
Yeah.
There's a number of things that are great about deployments. We're just trying to take all the great things about associations and make sure deployments have those too.
Yeah. So if I think about the things we talked about so far and what we might have left out, rollout plans, in case anyone had used them in the past in anywhere, because you'd only see them in anywhere. So those do not exist in 16 temporarily. So don't go to anywhere to look for rollout plans. The offline cab file is gone from, if you go to preferences, you'll see that there's no more updates thing, a tab off to the side, because that's not a thing anymore. And yeah, and think about boosters. Like I have a booster here in my lab. If you have Windows machines in particular, boosters will be super helpful for you.
Yeah, so on both platforms, so all the updates are now through DDM for the more recent devices for Apple, right? So you want Apple caching servers for those.
Yep.
So that not every device is doing a home run to Apple to go get the content. And the same goes, our boosters for Windows devices are important in this same regard. So if you don't want your devices to go to the internet to get it from Microsoft, every single one, you want to throw a booster in place. And then Josh mentioned it before, but it'll cache automatically for 7 days.
Yeah. So I think,
And then recache if it needs to, if something's
yeah.
still requesting it after that time.
Yeah, so it keeps itself clean. And there's actually, that reminds me that, so if you have boosters, there is a new port that's on the TCP and UDP ports list that the booster uses for that. Because we have Nginx is the web service that's listening for connections, and I think it's 20,030, but it's on the TCP ports article. So you'll want to make sure that your clients can get to the booster on that port. To be able to do the caching. So I don't think there's anything else. I think
I
that
don't think there's anything else technical, but I'm real curious if anybody is. Are you patching in this kind of manner where you're doing kind of an alpha beta in production, or do you just go straight to production? Like, how do you do it, in your environments? And feel free to bring anybody on stage, Josh.
oh yeah, if you hit the little raise hand thing, you can ask if you want to talk because at this point, and I see Marcus and Larry are typing. So Marcus normally is testing on his own machine and then applies it to the rest, but your way is interesting too. Yeah, I mean, testing on your own machine, think of that as like alpha. And so at least have like a beta that's like a couple of machines where it wouldn't be the end of the world if something went wrong, right? Because better that those machines break than everything breaking.
Well, and you need to be judicious in who you choose to
Yeah.
be in those groups. You want people that will work with you, not your mortal enemies. Right? Because if you do, in fact, have a problem, you want to make sure that you've got IT friendly folks that you've got included in the alpha and beta testing.
Yeah.
And that, just best practice. This isn't just for patching. This is for anything. If you're rolling out new versions of any software, especially in-house apps, where you're concerned about levels and such, or production, then testing is a good example of that. Make sure and deploy it carefully and slowly is better.
Yeah, and I mean, we used to do it this real way even over a decade ago when Tony and I ran a desktop engineering group, and there's like 6 of us in what would be the alpha, and then all of IT was the beta, and then we would expand beyond IT. And what you'll find usually is IT people have the most problematic machines because they're installing all sorts of stuff. But that's kind of good because they'll not only run into the problem, but they'll work with you hopefully to figure out if it'll be a problem beyond IT.
Now, one thing we didn't look at, Josh, was in the actual devices themselves
We didn't.
from a patching perspective.
So if I go to this new machine that I think just rebooted itself from patching, and I look at software updates, I could see, here, let's make this a little easier to, okay. So I can see these statuses. I'll make this a little wider. Oops. So I got these patches, and in this case, these are they'll say no file set, but they're installed. So that's why.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was saying before, that no matter how the patch got installed, right? So we haven't even created a file set, or maybe you deleted the file set, but there's no file set in FileWave for any of those 3 patches, but this device is actually patched. So we'll get that status from every device, regardless of how it was installed.
Yeah, and in fact, this machine did just install patches and did just reboot, and so probably it's doing a verify anyway, but I'll just kick things along just in case anything changes. So then we have these where they say completed.
Yes, but those also reported in just now, that. So the patch has come back and said that it's complete, and this you may need that
There we go.
there you go.
Probably would
Right,
have
so
finished verifying on its own.
it's really important to note that the reporting date for a device. So, and you can see a lot of this if you look at device details and look at last update. The information that you see here is only as recent as whatever the device has sent you. So this one says that the file set status was completed. That's because it was true. It was completed. The file set had completed as far as the file set was concerned. We told it that it needed it. It said, yep, I see it. It thought it's completed, but the device then needed to install it and then report back in a second inventory that it was actually installed.
Yeah.
So what's great about those 2 columns is they're totally separate. Installed means it's actually installed on the machine. File set status is much less important. Yes, it's nice to know that it completed, but it actually doesn't matter because all you really care about in this case is that missing status, and you can use that up at the top. You can show that with that filter. So you can look at any device and you can say that it's status. It's the first one, Josh.
Oh, wait, what?
Sorry, go to show
Oh,
all.
yeah.
It's that first one.
I was
It's
going
missing.
down the wrong
So,
path.
like when you look at a machine, any good IT person doesn't give a crap about any device that's patched, right? You just care about the ones that are not, right? So you can then look in here and say, okay, that one's missing, but of course that one is a virus definition update from a week and a half ago. So yeah, we don't actually care about that
And I
particular
can
patch
right
because
click
it's
it
actually patched for something else.
and reveal, and then I'm going to see the status and see, in fact, this machine is the only one that shows as missing it. And I don't have a file set for it. So what you're going to see is because that was a device that came in and patched and then rebooted, you're going to see that this was newly discovered, and so now it's in requested only windows. And so I'd repeat my cycle of, and for definition updates, you might go a little more rapidly and maybe straight to production for Defender updates. So I think that covers all the things, and we got in just in about an hour, even with our audio problems at the beginning.
Yeah. Hey, thank you everybody for joining. For those who are interested, PN is on the call today, and he's doing a special session in our Did You Know series on Tuesday, I think. Is it Tuesday?
Here, This is how anybody
29
could know. And you'll see it's right here on the 29th.
So that did you know? What are you going to be talking about in that did you know, PN?
I will be talking. It's slightly related to what we talked today because it's about Apple DDM, and as you know, DDM is the basics to install software update on most of your Apple devices, even Apple TVs, incoming version of Apple TVs, tvOS. So, yeah, if you want to learn things about DDM, what's the current state, and what we'll be doing with DDM in FileWave, yeah, join us next week.
All right, super. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you.
And thank you for joining, and thank you for bearing with the initial audio stuff. So, until next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.